just last October, after we had already had the other locations open, we, slimmed down our menu. We looked at our product mix and figured out what was selling. We applied the 80-20 rule. This 20% is what's making the 80%, and really doubled down on that. And so if I could give any advice when it comes to scaling, I would say it's like figure out what's really working in your business, because you might be successful even now, but that might not be, there's probably some small factors that are really creating all the success, and the rest of it is just creating more energy for you that are taking away more energy. Yeah, if you get rid of that, focus on what works, you'll see even more success.
Welcome to Whisking It All with your host, Angela Esposito, co-founder of Whisk.ai, a food and beverage intelligence platform. We're going to be interviewing hospitality professionals around the world to really understand how they do what they do. Welcome to another episode of Whisking It All. We're here today with Harold Walters, the CEO and co-founder of Shootz. Harold, thanks for joining us.
Man, thanks for having me. Excited.
Of course, I've heard great things. I know we haven't officially met until today, but I'm excited to dive in. I see your stuff on LinkedIn. I think we have a ton of mutual connections. So really excited to hear about your backstory. Easy place to start, and then we'll probably backtrack a little. But can you just tell people what is Shootz? Yeah, so Shootz is a
Hawaiian Asian fusion. We focus primarily on fried chicken katsu. So it's kind of like an Asian hot chicken. The only difference is that, compared to like Nashville hot chicken and whatnot, is that we have a egg battered panko fried chicken, and then we baste it in a kimchi butter. So it's a Hawaiian Asian fusion out of Southern California, started by me and three of my childhood friends. We met in a bar and just came up with an idea and just went with it.
That's awesome. And I'd love to always understand, why are people do what they do, what got them into it. So can you share a bit about your background and kind of what led you to the food and beverage space?
Yeah, so my background before getting into the restaurant space was in tech primarily. So my first career job was customer success as an engineer at a few different tech companies, mostly in the web hosting space. So I worked with tech companies anywhere from hosting traditional shared hosting websites to eventually enterprise web hosting companies.
Got it.
And then from there in 2017, I ventured into entrepreneurship through e-commerce. So I started my own drop shipping company. And then from there, I went ahead and, buying product from China, selling it out here, really just dove into that whole world of just internet marketing. Running a lot of Facebook ads, Instagram ads, dealing with influencers, things like that. I really loved it. I had a lot of success in it. And one day, one of my friends came over to me and said, "Hey, I think we're ready to finally, start my own restaurant." And for myself, I had no experience in the restaurant industry whatsoever. Right. I never worked a job in the restaurant before. I've never been in a kitchen, any of that. So I was just like, all right, cool. This sounds like a cool idea to invest in. Let's see what happens. Yeah, like I said, we met in that bar and came up with an idea and just went from there. Wow.
Yeah, it's definitely not an easy industry. So to jump in, I wonder if it was almost a silver lining that you didn't work in it. Maybe it would have swayed your decision if you did. No, I'm just kidding. But
probably.
But that's super interesting. I'm curious, how would you say maybe your experience in e-com, maybe shaped your approach when kind of, number one, founding, but also running Shootz?
In the beginning, I wasn't really thinking I was going to be running the operation. I was the only one that had any, I would say, real business experience. But it wasn't, I was more like, hey, my two friends that are in culinary, they went to school for this. They've worked in the restaurant industry. They'll run it. And then me and one of my other friends, he had a little bit of experience running his own restaurant before, right. But it was more with his family and things like that. So we were kind of on the back end, hey, you guys got this. This is what you really want to do. And, we're just here to support on the business side of things, on the marketing side of things and whatnot. Right. And so the shift really happened, obviously. So we opened during COVID. So we opened September of 2020, but we signed the lease on our location in March of 2019.
Oh, wow.
So we're just waiting at this point for this thing to get, built up, and we're just building up the brand.
Wow.
And once we, finally opened, we really opened with a lot of success. But after COVID happened, I quickly started to see, okay, there's a huge shift happening right now, digitally, in the restaurant space by necessity. And, what used to be a industry that was well behind, still is well behind, but all of the information and all of the technology, the tools, the strategies that I was using in e-commerce became necessary in this industry. And I started to see that. And so I started to really craft a vision for what could happen with Shootz. And that was around the time. So this is maybe early 2021 was around the time that I took the reins in leading the organization.
Wow. Yeah, I think it's interesting because, we've seen the same thing as during COVID, you see, restaurants are typically the last to adopt tech, tech is adopted in every other industry, and the restaurants are like, oh, cool, you can reserve online, I'll take that, and then it's like, wow, right. Cloud-based POS, that sounds good, and all kind of last to the party. But I did see that shift as well, where COVID just kind of accelerated it, where people were more open to digital solutions. The obvious one being everyone had to do a lot of digital ordering, so online ordering, and maybe third-party ordering type stuff, or curbside pickup stuff, or whatever it was. So it was all related to that. You also saw the resurgence of QR codes. So that was the biggest comeback of 2020. Right. It was they're gone for 10 years. I used to use them just for BBM, right, or BlackBerry phones, BBM Messenger, yep. I think it was, use those barcodes, and kind of never used it since. So it was kind of cool to see come back. But yeah, so to be able to apply everything you learned or some of those lessons to the restaurants, I'd love to know, what was maybe something practical or tactical that you were able to implement, let's say, from your experience on the e-com side?
Yeah. So when I first got in, I didn't really, obviously I knew tech, I knew marketing, or digital marketing and internet marketing, but I didn't really know all of the different platforms and whatnot in the restaurant space that were currently available to me. And so I really had to learn the restaurant industry. I literally knew nothing about it. So originally it was okay, well, what POS do we use? And first we just kind of went to Clover, because I was okay, this is a cloud-based POS. But I didn't know about Toast. I didn't know about Revel. I didn't know about any of these other platforms. But I knew that we needed to have a focus on data. I just knew that at the end of the day, we need to collect as much data as possible: names, email addresses, phone numbers, whatever other data we could get. So we focused on that. And originally I didn't know how we were going to get it. I just knew that we needed to get it. So it was all right, 5 stars loyalty program. We set that up, and it was just all right, we're just going to make sure that we're collecting names, emails, and phone numbers. Another thing that we did was, so our locations are primarily in food halls. So in a food hall, you have, multiple different units or multiple different restaurants. In our food hall, we had 15 different restaurants in there.
Okay.
Plus retail and things like that. So everyone's kind of running around. They're going to the bar. They're going to the brewery there. And we were always packed. And so I wanted a text message solution, because I didn't want to use buzzers. I didn't want to use calling out orders, things like that, because it doesn't work when people are walking around and they go too far. The buzzer doesn't work. Stuff gets stolen. So I actually went into the Clover App Store, and we found this platform that allows us to basically send out text messages, but it was super expensive. And then eventually, out of nowhere, I want to say maybe a month after using it, the app literally just disappeared, off the Clover app market. Man. It just disappeared. They weren't supporting it anymore. And so me and a friend of mine actually created a software that allows us to basically intake text messages and whatnot. We tried to get in the Clover app market, but it was a terrible situation with that. But in creating that, 300, 400 customers a day were getting a phone number every order. And then we would just put them into a flow that, opted them into to SMS marketing and things like that. So really it was just a focus on data and just being able to, communicate with our guests, especially at a time when everyone's kind of inside of their house. No one's really coming outside. But when they do, we want to make sure that we're the ones that are continuously communicating with them.
Makes sense. It makes sense. And it's funny you say that, because I think like it's obvious now that you said it, but the fact that you came from that e-com background, you understood right away, like capturing data, capturing emails, capturing numbers, which is restaurants are finally starting to understand, like, okay, cool. Like I can offer internet and capture emails, and I should probably have some type of newsletter, and I should probably be in, like, they're starting to get it more. So like, it's really cool to see that. That's probably a competitive advantage you had, is like, it's obvious in your world, because in e-com, it's like a no-brainer. You have the abandoned cart, you have the auto emails, you have the promotions. So it's like, of course we got to do this. So applying that to a restaurant, which was, a little more old school in terms of like maybe the way they think about tech, is super neat. And just out of curiosity, like how many, and I should know this, so I apologize, but how many Shootz locations do you have to date?
We have 3 right now.
That's
and
awesome.
We're opening up another one right now too.
That's cool. Okay, great. That's what the reason I wanted to ask that is because we have a lot of restaurant operators and owners that listen to this podcast, and I always try to ask questions that maybe they'll be able to be like, oh, this is helpful for me. And so one of talking about capturing emails, talking about SMS, that's already useful. But like coming from someone who didn't have experience, I think it's an interesting angle, because it's like you're coming with a clean slate of how you see things and what you're looking for. And so I guess first question I have for you in regards to that is, how did you, knowing what you know now, like, how do you think about, like, let's say the tech stack, and like, what did the order of, importance look like for you?
Yeah. So this developed over time as well for me. Cause like I said, I had no experience with the restaurant industry. So, the first thing I did was I needed to get around people in the restaurant industry and at a high level. So I started going to the events and things like that. I went to a Fast Casual Summit. That was the first event I went to, and we were on a tour, and I was on we were on a tour bus to go do a little food tour and whatnot. And I met Tammy Billings. I don't know if you know who Tammy is.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. So Tammy Billings, like, I think at the time she was working with Wisely. Okay. And she just started talking to me about POS companies and whatnot. And she told me about like Toast and Revel and things like that. And so I started to really research the different POS companies and see like, okay, well, I already know, like, in my mind what I need in a sense. I know I need a database. I know I need some at least somewhat like decent data that I can use. And then I can then plug in everything into. For me, it's always been POS first. I'm always looking at, that's kind of like my brain. Yeah. What are we going to connect everything into? Now we probably have a bloated tech stack for a restaurant of our size, because I literally went into it like, I want to look as if we're not necessarily look as if we're big, but be prepared for if we were to go big.
Yeah, to scale. Yeah, makes sense.
Right, just built it to scale. So yeah, POS, and then later on, I started to understand like I didn't understand COGS. Like I understood like, okay, this is the percentage of, that we're going to spend on food and whatnot. But I didn't understand, like the actual formula for cost of goods. I didn't really see like how important inventory was and like waste and things like that. We don't have waste really in retail when it comes to e-commerce, like not like the restaurant does.
Right.
So, then it was like, okay, Restaurant 365. So plugging in like platforms like that I can have inventory management. I didn't understand how to really do accounting. So originally our tech stack was kind of like just different platforms that plugged in, but may have not necessarily gave us the best result for the operations side of things. So I might be a long-winded answer, but basically, just looking at, I had to really start looking at the operation side of things because I didn't understand operations. I knew tech, but I didn't understand operations. And so really starting to learn how to operate a restaurant successfully started to evolve the way I looked at the tech stack.
That makes sense. Yeah, typically what we see, like in general when talking to restaurants, is like POS is usually first, just because, if you're opening a new place, you're worried about collecting money and charging customers, which makes sense. If you can't do that, there's not much else. In terms of the tech stack, obviously there's the build out and finding your employees and this and that and permits and whatever. But in terms of opening and tech stack, it's usually POS first. What we've seen come up second, and you nailed it, is usually something COGS related. So you mentioned Restaurant 365, they're great. Some people like that are more bar heavy might look at a Whisk, and there's other people out there. And then the third one, and these can be interchangeable, people look at labor, which makes sense. They might look at scheduling. And if you think about it, it's logical, because it's like, yeah, if you think about a restaurant, now that you've learned all these things, you probably realize, okay, there's something called the prime cost, and prime cost is your COGS and your labor. So it's like, probably makes sense to have a tool for COGS and have a tool for labor. And then what we've ended up seeing is after that, it could be a mix of things, but usually a close number 4 might be loyalty related or marketing related. And then you can get fancy online ordering and chargeback solution if you get a lot, so then you start getting in the weeds, and don't get me wrong, there could be a lot of valuable stuff, but that's kind of the general order we see is like POS, labor / COGS, it's maybe a solution each, and then anything and everything else kind of follows. But yeah, so hearing your story, like one thing I'd love to understand is it's one thing to just start, right, and then get one location, but it's another to then expand, and you're in 3 and going to 4. So someone with no experience, which I love because it's super humbling to hear, like, and I think sometimes it can be a competitive advantage because you're going in with a clean slate, fresh mind, willingness to learn, which sometimes the negative could be like someone that's been in the industry, they have a way of thinking and it's hard to change their mind, right? Obviously there's advantages to experience, but it also could sometimes work against you because you're not open-minded. But having said that, talk to me a bit about like how you thought about growth and how you scaled, because I'm sure there's a lot of restaurant operators listening on this. They might have one location and they're like, I would love to one day have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, right? And beyond. How did you start building more than one restaurant, basically?
Like when we opened, we were like really successful. So like our sales were through the roof, but at the same time, we didn't really understand like a lot of the stuff that we just talked about right now. So I really didn't fully know like where my COGS should be or where my labor should be. And we also had, 2 of my partners operating in the store. So that kind of like gives you this like virtual idea that like your labor is really good when it's really not, because they're not even really like paying themselves, things like that. So in the beginning, and, I had a mentor who wasn't in the restaurant space, but had a ton of business experience and, had done a lot of like mergers and acquisitions and exited some companies. And so talking to him, he was like, scale fast. Like if you can scale fast. But he would like be like, you got to make sure that the thing works. Like make sure you have the model down. And so in my mind, we had the model down because, I only knew what I knew.
Right.
And so it was like, all right, guys, let's like, this thing is working. It's killing it. It's operating. Let's start to look for the next location. And as we do that, let's simultaneously, work your guys way out of the restaurant so that someone else can take over that location.
Right.
And so we were definitely overly ambitious, and we opened. Initially, my second location was actually like a very large build out, and I had like this idea that where it was like, okay, we're gonna have this other location. So our first location is 600 square feet.
Okay,
really small. We did 1.9 million out of that location, so pretty good for a 600 square foot location.
Yeah, that's excellent. Wow.
The second location I was looking at was like 2,800, 3,000 square feet or something. It was going to be a full build out, right? Like, so I mean, my mindset was like this hub and spoke model. We're going to have this one location. We're going to do like we're going to do it'll be also our prep kitchen, and we'll like store all of our packaging and stuff like that there.
Right.
And, that'll be what we'll deliver everything to the stores out of there. So it's like this whole, like, let's cut out all the labor and everything out of the stores. So good idea in theory, but didn't make sense as far as like the capital expenditures. I didn't understand that I can have like a co-manufacturer make some of this stuff for us, just, instead. So luckily we were able to get out of that deal.
Okay.
I developed a partnership with the developer of our food hall. And that allowed us to then, they had a lot of real estate experience and things like that. So they actually helped me get out of that deal. And then we made our second location a second gen location. It was actually a second gen food hall location. So we went from about to spend 900 to a million, $900,000 to $1 million on this location to now opening another 600 square foot location for, I want to say we opened that location for about 80 grand. So, so now my mindset when it comes to, scaling is it's like, one, make sure that you have your prime cost in order, make sure that you have a solid manager in place and then also your culture in place. We didn't really have any of that. So we opened up that second and third location, really just like trying to figure things out still. So my thoughts on growth now versus then have obviously evolved a lot.
It's amazing. I think there's a lot of good nuggets there and good takeaways for the listeners, right? Like thinking about, like you said, prime cost, thinking about the cost of the build out, right? And not just looking at like the cool factor and this might be nice and this might be, but like at the end of the day, it's a business. And it's like, you got to think about all these kind of, underlying things, because that the bottom line is ultimately what counts. Like, yes, you do all these things and the love for hospitality and the guest experience, but like they all lead to being profitable, because if you're not profitable, like then nothing else matters, because you can't serve guests, you can't continue your passion, you can't do all that, So I'd love to hear from like your perspective. Yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah.
When we opened our second location, third location, another thing that I had like that we didn't realize looking back now, we had a significantly different menu. Like we had like 6 different like plate options, menu options on the menu. And then when we were opening that big location, we were like, we could do a bar, like a full bar on there. We could add liquor and stuff like that. And so it was just like this idea of like unneeded vertical integration inside of the restaurant of like, let's add liquor and this and that, when it's like, have you really doubled down on what you currently have that works now? Just last October, after we had already had the other locations open, we, slimmed down our menu. We looked at our product mix and figured out what was selling. We applied the 80-20 rule. This 20% is what's making the 80%, and really doubled down on that. And so if I could give any advice when it comes to scaling, I would say it's like figure out what's really working in your business, because you might be successful even now, but that might not be, there's probably some small factors that are really creating all the success, and the rest of it is just creating more energy for you that are taking away more energy. If you get rid of that, focus on what works, you'll see even more success. So.
I love that. No, well said. And it's funny because it's something you kind of learn in business in general, but 100% applied to restaurants as well, which is sometimes less is more. And it's like, as humans, sometimes we're like, oh, let's add this and add that. And you want to add things, but sometimes like subtraction makes things better. And I couldn't agree more, because I've learned that lesson the hard way too, is less is more, and double down on what works. Because as humans, sometimes we think about what's not working, and you know what? If we had you always think the grass is greener. Like if we had this other thing, then if we did this, or if we open in this it's always something else. When it's like, wait, take a step back. What's working today? So for people listening, just to echo that, because that was a great takeaway. Looking at that P mix, looking at your top sellers, and looking at it from a profitability standpoint too, and then doubling down on that, because the 80-20 rule applies there the same way it applies in many different places, where it's like usually 20% of your items are making 80% of your revenue. So understanding that and then optimizing. So that's a great takeaway. And then I'd love to understand. So now that, as you're opening more locations, you're rethinking, obviously prime costs, you're looking at, making sure your menu is profitable. So a bit of maybe like menu engineering and picking the top selling items. What other kind of challenges or lessons did you take away? So our listeners can take these too, in terms of like scaling, things you didn't anticipate or lessons you learned. Because that one was awesome. If you have a few other nuggets, that'd be great.
There's so many conversations right now going on about tech, data, internet marketing, whatever it is, and so, in the beginning, it's easy to think like, oh, if I apply this piece of tech, it's going to make us, this is going to work now. And so understanding that like each piece of tech that you add into your stack requires one, it requires financial capital. It requires human capital. It requires so much more just to like make that thing work successfully. And so I'd say the biggest lesson for me, and this, I had to learn it because I came from the tech space, was that tech doesn't solve all of my problems. Like at the end of the day, like if your operations isn't dialed in and you don't focus on the thing that is really your business, I had this idea coming in where it was like, okay, we're going to be really a tech media company in the long run. But like at the end of the day, it's like food is what we do. Food is what sells. Food is why the customer comes. So, and experience is why they come. And so doubling down on that, but just understanding that like any piece of tech you add takes time. Anything you add, whether it's tech, whether it's another solution, whether it's another payroll platform, whatever, it's going to require some work. It's going to require, you're going to run into some issues. There's going to be some integration that breaks down. There's going to be something that doesn't work how you thought it was going to be. I call it like bullet point bias, where it's like you're looking at the site and you see all these different bullet points and you're like, oh, this is exactly what we need. But it's like, nope, there's some stuff in the details that you're missing there. So I just say being very mindful of what you're adding into your organization and looking at the hard cost, but also looking at the cost that you can't necessarily see.
Yes. It's funny. I was just having a conversation with someone, and it was exactly around that concept of, simplicity is harder than people think. And that's why like Apple and Steve Jobs was so innovative, because it was like making something simple or look simple is like a really hard thing to do. Like it's easy to be like, oh, let's add this and this feature. And the parallel I'll give, let's say like Whisk as an example, is we're a tech company. We'll help restaurants with, cost of goods sold and really focus on the bar side, but we help the food side too. And the parallel I'll give is like, if we add a feature, let's say like, oh, it'd be cool to, allow people to scan invoices, which we do. But it's like, every time you add a feature, it's not just the cost of like, oh, it'll take the dev team X amount and it's like, well, now support's got to be trained on this. Sales has to be trained on this. We got to update our documentation. We got to let the clients know, we got to update our marketing efforts. So it's like, to your point, it's not just the cost of the thing. It's the cost you kind of don't see that now it's complex. And now it's this thing you're supporting forever. Now it's not just like, oh, we did this feature, check. It's now like that feature has to be improved. And the same when we like add POS integrations. We integrate with Toast and a bunch of POS partners, but sometimes when a client's like, oh, we use this POS, unless it's like a big POS that makes sense, we think twice for that exact reason, because you add it and it might not be hard to add because it's just an API integration, but then it's like, now it's the cost of maintaining it, the cost of training the staff, the cost of supporting that, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's another great piece of wisdom you're sharing is, again, for the restaurateurs listening, is thinking about simplicity and sometimes improving things by subtracting,
Right. And because those things that you add can actually be damaging to your business as well. Because like you said, it's like if you add a feature, or in the restaurant space, if we add a menu item, if that menu item isn't actually good, and now new guests are coming and then they try this item as opposed to your one item that everyone loves,
exactly,
they might decide to never come back because they had the bad item,
So true. And on the restaurant side, it trickles like, and it's one thing we help a lot with, but it's, to your point, it really trickles. And we work with a lot of full service restaurants too. And full service, it's even worse because it's like, oh, we got this other dish. Well, now you got another supplier, another item you're buying, something that you have to worry. It's perishable. Like you said, it's not retail. That piece of chicken is going to go bad. So it's like, there's this kind of trickle effect where every time you complicate the item, now the chef has a new item. The staff has to be trained on how to cook it, how to prep it, how to serve it. The waiter's got to be how to present this new dish. Like, oh, we have this, right? So it's like that one extra item created this whole operational nightmare where it's training, it's waiters knowing what to sell, it's adding it to the menu and printing it, it's blah, 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 blah. So it's like what seems simple at first, which is like, it's a few extra items and it's more choice, actually ends up being like crazy. But I love that because that's really, really good feedback coming from someone, again, who wasn't in the industry, who's now like, got a ton of knowledge. I can only imagine how much you learn, and that's why I find it's so pertinent. I'd love to know kind of like what's the vision with Shootz, right? So like I know what you're doing today, 3 locations, opening a 4th. Yeah. What's next for you guys? I know there's a mention of like how you want to scale to top nationwide fast casual brands. So tell me more about your vision and like how you're thinking of getting there.
Yeah, so it's been very, very fluid, and I'm very like I'm very open to like whatever happens. I'm very loose when it comes to stuff like that. So in the beginning, you know, my mentor asked me, he was like, well, what do you want to do? Like, what's your plan with this thing? Like, where do you want to take it? And this was at the time I had just, you know, taken the role of leading the company. I was like, well, I don't know. Like, I'm pretty sure I want to exit eventually. And he was like, okay, well, you know, how much do you want to exit for? And so I was like, I don't know. I was like, I don't know, maybe 100 million. Like, and I'd seen, and I'd seen like, it was another company I just read in a magazine at the time that had just exited for like 114 million or well. So I was like, okay, well, guess it's possible in the restaurant industry. I had no idea. Yeah. And so, the very next morning, I get a text message from a friend of mine. He sends me 2 books. One of them is a private equity book, and the other one is a book called The $100 Million Exit. So I was like, oh, wow, this is like, okay, that's some confirmation right there. That's crazy. That's awesome. And so initially, like, that was my vision. Like, all right, we're going to exit for 100 million. How do we get there? I have no idea, but that's the plan. We're going to exit for 100 million. Yeah. And so, like I said, I've been very like fluid with how it happens. And then eventually, this was maybe 8 months ago, like last October or so. And like I said, we had seen a lot of success, but we also had scaled. And when we scaled, we started to see a lot of decline. Reviews went down. We went from having like 4.5, 4.6 stars on Yelp and Google on average to now we're down to like 4.2, 4.1. One of our stores dipped under 4.9 or under 3.9 at one point. It was like, okay, something's wrong here. Right. Then now that I have all the right pieces of tech, I started to see like, oh, our prime costs are not where we need them to be. You know, our store level EBITDA is way lower than it needs to be, things like that. And I'm like, you know, we're not really making money anymore. And I honestly had a crisis. I went from being in love with this industry to now starting to feel like this isn't really worth it anymore. I can go back to e-commerce and make way more money than doing this for way less effort. But then I had another conversation with one of my other mentors who used to be at Panda Express for a while. And he talked to me about just like vision and like really having a real ultimate intention for your business. And we talked about Nike and Apple and Chick-fil-A and In-N-Out and brands like that. And basically I started to have a real, I was reinvigorated. I started to have another love again for the business because I realized that setting that goal of $100 million exit was kind of like it was too material. Right. And it was also small. Like I realized like, oh, this is a really small like idea. And so because I was like, there's so many brands out there. There's $1 billion brands. Why can't we be $1 billion brand? Why can't we really like build something that people are going to love and want to come work at and will actually have, you know, impact in the world? And so I shifted my mindset to just say, we're just going to go big. How we get there, I don't know, but we're going to go as big as we can. And I just set the goal of, hey, I want to open 100 locations in the next 5 years by 2029. So whether that is owner operated, all of our locations are owner operated currently, but I was like, whether that's owner operated, whether it's with a solid franchise partner, I don't know yet, but I'm just open to whatever comes our way.
That's cool. And I think you touched on something super interesting, which is the idea of like having a clear vision, because it's something that also, you know, speaking from a personal level, took me time as well. Because sometimes you just like, hey, I'm just building this product because I want to help these clients. And it's just like very solution oriented. And it's a great place to start. Here's a pain. I want to solve this pain. But then as time goes on, it's like for the company to really grow, what I realized is like the vision has to be authentic, it has to be real, it has to be big, and it has to be big enough that other people could fit in it. Because if it's a small vision, it might be good for you, but then it's like you're not going to build 100 location place if the vision's small, right? So it's like having a vision that's big enough that other people could fit into as well. And it takes time, but then what's really neat, and I'm sure you're probably starting to see this too, is once you're clear on the vision, all the other parts start falling into place more easily because it's like easier to hire the right people. It's easier to see. It's easier to say yes and no to certain things because it's like you have that vision. And so to people listening, it's a obvious but good hack is like reverse engineer. Like think about what the goal is and then work backwards. So to your point, if you're like, okay, I got this, you know, big, hairy, audacious goal. I got this big goal and it's 100 locations in 5 years. Well, at least now you can start reverse engineering and say, okay, that means on average X amount of stores per year, but obviously we'll probably start slower at scale fast. So X, okay, this is what it looks like. If it looks like that, I mean, okay, what do I got to do? And like you start working backwards, and it's a really obvious thing, you know, saying it, but like for people that might not see it, it becomes obvious once you see like, okay, great. If I can do this with my life, with my restaurant, with whatever, it becomes a lot easier to hit your goals. And it's something that I've done in my personal life. So just to give you maybe a quick anecdote is like, I started doing that with my calendar. And who was it? But basically like I bought this big calendar. It's in my closet. I keep it on the wall. And I just work backwards and I say, okay, what are the things I absolutely need to do this year? And I say, okay, I want to do X, Y, Z. So maybe start off with the big goals. Cool. Then I go a bit smaller. It's like, okay, what are things that are obviously very important? It's like, okay, going to visit family for Christmas in Montreal and going to this, and my brother's getting married. So like, cool, put it on the calendar. And it was like this exercise where, you know, you put, I don't know if you ever heard that analogy with the vase and you fill it up with water and sand. Exactly. But start with the rocks first, then the pebbles. But that's what I realized is applying that concept of rocks first, then the pebbles, then the sand, then the water. But your calendar is like an amazing way. Whereas before I had this misconception that like, it's kind of lame if you plan. I'm more of a spontaneous guy. But then I realized those two things don't have to be exclusive. It's like you can be a spontaneous guy and live in the moment, but also just like plan your year to a certain extent. And what I realized is in a weird way, even though it sounds like, oh man, you plan ahead, it's like you end up being more spontaneous because you don't feel guilty. Because like when someone's like, yo, let's hit up the boat on Saturday, you're like, cool, yeah, I got nothing on there that's going towards my goals. Let's do it. So anyways, little nugget I wanted to share because it changed my life. And I was like, super simple concept, but it changed my life.
I'm glad you shared that, because that was actually one of the revelations I had in that time as well, where it was like, okay, we need to create a real vision. And in that time, you know, I tend to like do way too much. And also getting in the restaurant industry, I still had shiny object syndrome as an entrepreneur.
Right.
So like, you know, Shootz wasn't the only brand we opened. I opened a cookie shop. I opened a brunch spot. I opened another restaurant that we ended up closing. It was just ridiculous. Like I wasn't focused because I didn't really like line up with the vision. But one of the things you just mentioned right now was, have you read 10x equals 2x, or 10x is better than 2x?
No, but
Gap in the Game, Who Not How. Oh, dude, no. you would love those.
Okay,
I can already tell you would love those books.
Okay, awesome.
Basically a psychologist and then an entrepreneur who's been in the game for a long time now came together to write these trilogy of books. But one of the books is called 10x. Their latest one is 10x is better than 2x.
Yeah.
And the whole concept is basically like, it's better to have a 10x goal than it is a 2x goal. It's better to go for 100 million than it is to go for a $10 million business or whatever, right? Or, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so one of the concepts in the book he talks about is setting like off days, like on your calendar. So literally it's like the first thing he schedules in his calendar is 180 free days. So like he has nothing but free days. Like he does no work whatsoever.
That's awesome. So half the year free days. I love that. Okay.
Half the year right off the bat.
I'm bought in. I'm in. Keep going.
Yeah. And at first I was like, okay, how am I going to make this work? Right. So he does that. And then after that, he sets focus days. Third of the days is focus days. And then the other half is going to be, or so it's the 180. And then it's like however many other days you split it in half into focus days and buffer days. Okay. Buffer days are meetings, your meeting days, your whatever other small non-priority tasks that you need to do. And then the focus days are like hey, these are the things that have to get done, quadrant 2 type stuff, whatever, right?
Right.
I started applying that. I literally looked at my calendar and I said, okay, Wednesday's free, Saturday and Sunday are free days. I'm hanging out with my family. I'm not going to work. And if I do have to absolutely work on any of those days, I'm going to split it up where it's like the morning I'm doing it, and after that it's free. And so what I learned in doing that was that, just like you said, is I learned like, okay, well, look, I only have Tuesday and Thursday to focus, Monday and Friday for these buffer days and meetings and whatnot. And so what ends up happening is I automatically only do the things that I actually have the time to do. If I don't have the time to do them, it must not be that important. And so like the stuff that just was getting in the way, taking all of my energy, just started to fall away. I had way more peace. I didn't feel guilty if I felt like watching TV or watching my show or whatever.
Yeah.
Because it was like, this time is dedicated for this. I don't have to feel guilty anymore for it. And I can focus on the days it's time to focus.
That's
awesome. I love that concept.
I love it. And another like little point in there that took me a while to learn was the idea, and it sounds like you're already doing it with the focus and other task days, and but it was the idea of theming your days. And so it's like I actually only do my podcast on Wednesdays because Wednesday is my podcast day. So it's like I'm in that flow, and like Monday is my creative day where I do content, and like Tuesday, Thursdays I do my meetings. And what I realize is just the idea of context switching is like, it's hard and it takes brain power to go from this, and then right after I got a sales meeting, and then I got an investor meeting, and it's like, so by kind of theming your days, you're actually just more productive, which is super cool. So love this, and I think that there's a lot of good nuggets to take out of that. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
and then maybe just to kind of wrap up, I always like to hear kind of like what's next for you guys. So obviously now we know the vision, 100 locations by 2029, opening number 4. So like what's next? Anything you want to share with our listeners of what's next for Shootz?
Yeah, so really just dialing in our operations. I would say like we're in this place where we're really discovering reverse engineering what Shootz is, who we are, and really defining what the vision is that we want everyone to rally around. We have almost 53 employees right now, and it's like, as we know, we're going to start bringing in more people. We want to know, we want them to know what they're coming into and what they're going to be joining forces with. So it's really just been dialing in the operations, dialing in our tech stack, like the different tech that we brought in, making sure that we're utilizing it to its fullest and putting the right resources in place to make sure that everything is being used to its benefit, getting rid of what isn't working. And, we have, like I said, we have number 4 opening right now. We have number 5 is also in the works as well. So that's probably going to open. They've been getting really delayed. So that's probably going to open early January next year. And then number 4 should be opening probably in the next 3 months. That's so awesome. From there, I really want to spend next year of just, hey, we're going to focus on making sure that our numbers are where they need to be, making sure that we're growing the company, developing our people, growing this, sort of creating this ecosystem that is creating growth and development for everyone on our team, because we want to grow. We want our team to grow within. So right now, one of our store managers is employee number 1. One of our assistant managers is like employee number 3 or something like that. So our goal is just continue to like build up our team, the people that want to continue to expand and create a platform where they can step into the next locations and whatnot. So really want to just spend next year just focused on, making sure what we have is an environment for growth.
Yep.
And then from there, just go, sky's the limit, start. All of our locations are in food halls. So I really want to open up our first brick and mortar location.
Okay, nice.
Probably early 2026, I'd say, or late next year. We'll start working on that, test out a drive-through, and then see what else comes from there. If there's other opportunities, we're open to it.
That's awesome. And last but not least, I always like that off the show, just with like any plugs, so where people can reach you, find you. So if you wouldn't mind, where can they find you? Where can they find Shootz? You can drop like your website, all that good stuff. Yeah, for sure. You can follow Shootz on Instagram at Shootz.official, SHOOTZ.official. Our website, ShootzHawaiian.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Harold I. Walters, Instagram, Harold I. Walters. I'm even open if anyone ever wants to email me to ask questions. It's me, or it's Harold at ShootzHawaiian.com. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the gist of it. I love that. Thank you so much, Harold. It was awesome having you on the show, especially coming from a really unique perspective, because someone with that e-com experience, jumping to the restaurant world for the first time, I think you shared some really valuable knowledge. So thank you for being on the show. Once again, Harold Walters, CEO and co-founder of Shootz. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, man. Feel free to check out whisk.ai for more resources and schedule a demo with one of our product specialists to see if it's a fit for you.